Well, welcome back, everybody. I'm really looking forward to our next two agenda items. In recent weeks, we've all witnessed the national focus on race relations and racial inequality in really nearly every aspect of our nation's life. The science and engineering enterprise is not immune from that charge. About a month ago, the board issued a statement on racism in science and engineering. In acknowledging the longstanding racism that has existed in the science and engineering environment, the board committed itself to act intentionally to remove barriers and to ensure that the U.S. science and engineering environment is one in which all are respected and valued. So today's discussion is step one of that journey, beginning of a series of conversations and learning opportunities in which the board will engage to drive the implementation of the broadening participation pillar of our Vision 2030 roadmap. We begin with a presentation by Karen Marangel, NSF's Assistant Director for Education and Human Resources, and Claudia Rankins, who has been the Program Director for NSF's HBCU programs for over a decade. And this will be followed by a distinguished panel discussion on the broader Black experience in science and engineering. So Karen and Claudia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Good afternoon, and thank you all for the opportunity to talk with you about NSF's investments in historically Black colleges and universities, or HBCUs. The Directorate for Education and Human Resources and the Division of Human Resource Development in particular have a strong history of supporting research and education activities at HBCUs. We will discuss these and efforts across the foundation to support students and faculty at HBCUs. I'm pleased to introduce my colleague, Dr. Claudia Rankins, who has managed the Historically Black Colleges and Universities Undergraduate Program, or HBCU UP, at NSF for 12 years. HBCU UP is the signature program at NSF designed to strengthen STEM undergraduate education and research at HBCUs. And as Dr. Rankins will describe, HBCU UP is not the only program at NSF supporting HBCUs. A physicist by training, Dr. Rankins served in various faculty and administrative capacities at Hampton University prior to joining NSF. Her expertise in and passion for HBCUs has served NSF well. I'll now turn it over to Claudia.
Thank you, Dr. Marangel, and please permit me to share my screen. I hope everyone can see it. Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about historically Black colleges and universities, and to the board for your courageous statement on racism and engineering, in which you recognize the unique legacy and important role of HBCUs, and commit to increased support for research at these institutions. I also thank you for taking this moment in the history of this country to reflect on NSF's practices and even biases in who we consider worthy of research funding. This brief conversation will be about HBCUs, where I will give you some background on the institutions and NSF's funding history, as well as set the stage for that increased support. The map of where HBCUs are located reflects the history of the institutions, a few of which were started prior to the Civil War, some during the time following the Civil War and the end of slavery, and some during the era of Jim Crow and segregation. All were founded to educate Black Americans at a time when white institutions, mostly in the South, refused to do so. HBCUs were founded on the mission to educate the Black community, but have always been inclusive of admitting all who wanted to attend, to teach, to do research there, including Native Americans, Jewish refugees of Nazi Germany, and more recently, immigrant students and faculty. A brief synopsis of HBCUs, half of which are private and half are public institutions, with 12 community colleges among them, shows that 15 have ABET accredited engineering programs, 21 offer a PhD in at least one STEM discipline, 34 offer doctoral degrees, 58 master's degrees, 90 offer bachelor's degrees, and 42 associate degree programs. Their enrollment size ranges from 200 students to 12,000 students. 12% of HBCUs are research-intensive institutions. There's a notion or even myth that enrollment of HBCUs, especially of Black students, has waned after segregation ended and Black Americans had access to all institutions of higher education. NSF data, however, shows that enrollment at HBCU steadily rose from 1976 to 2010, despite the number of HBCUs decreasing by 10%. The blue line shows total enrollment, the orange line, enrollment of Black students. Changes in the federal student loan structure caused enrollment to drop sharply in the early 2010s. And it just began to rebound as now COVID-19 will add new challenges for HBCUs. However, enrollment in 2018 is still higher than it was in 1976. I want to give you a quick screenshot of where HBCUs are particularly successful in graduating Black students with bachelor's degrees. Latest statistics show that HBCUs enroll about 9% of Black undergraduate students. However, graduate a significantly higher percentage in critical fields such as engineering, the physical sciences, mathematics, the biological sciences, and agriculture. Additionally, HBCUs are 7 of the 8 top baccalaureate institutions of Black S&E doctorate recipients from 2013 to 2017. Over that period, 462 Black STEM doctorate recipients came just from these 7 HBCU baccalaureate institutions. What the statistics don't show, however, is what contributes to the success in these numbers. It is the culture and ethos of HBCUs that is the foundation of success and learning of the students they educate. HBCUs know how to best educate Black students in STEM, especially students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. So seeing these successes, one might think that HBCUs are well funded. But I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this next slide. On the left in blue, you see the total NSF funding to HBCUs. On the right in green, you see the research funding by NSF to HBCUs. Let me start by clarifying that by top 20 HBCUs, I mean the 20 HBCUs most funded by NSF. So the total funding has hovered around $100 million per year. That's about $1 million per institution on the average. Over 70% of the funding goes to 20 of the 101 institutions. This means the remaining 80 or so get around 30 million per year, usually less, combined. That is less than $400,000 per year per institution on the average. Yet, we expect miracles from these institutions. We want to hold them accountable for moving the so-called needle in graduating Black STEM students and for producing research. I frequently get asked about the impact of NSF funding on HBCUs, and I'll talk a little bit about impact later. However, to see more of an impact, simply put, more funding is needed, especially in the area of research, where I have to agree with the word used by a 2015 Senate report, which referred to the funding by NSF's research directorates to HBCUs as anemic. The small dark green sliver of R&D funding to 80 institutions is indeed anemic. And I'm not sure what impact we should expect as a result of NSF funding for that group of institutions. To be clear, The chart on the right is a subset of the chart on the left. To put this chart in perspective for you, the top 4 R1 funded institutions receive about $400 million annually from NSF in R&D funding. All 101 HBCUs receive this amount over a 10-year period. I'd like to emphasize 2 points about the green chart. More research funding would increase the research capacity of the top 20 institutions and allow R2 institutions to become R1 and others to become R2 institutions. More research funding to the other 80 institutions would increase the research capacity of their faculty. Also, to be clear, I am not arguing for a redistribution of the green piece of pie, but for an increase to it. More research funding to all HBCUs would alleviate the brain drain of Black faculty leaving these institutions and encouraging more of them to join. This pie chart shows that 770 awards were made by NSF to HBCUs over a 5-year period. Almost 60% came from EHR. On the average, the 6 remaining research directorates each made about 7 awards annually to HBCUs. Your briefing book contains a 2-page document that further describes the 3 congressionally mandated programs at NSF that fund HBCUs exclusively. HBCU Up, with a $35 million annual budget, makes about 50 to 60 awards annually for single investigator research, curriculum innovation, and institutional transformation, as well as for centers of broadening participation research. The HBCU Rise program annually makes 2 to 3 awards of $1 million to the 21 institutions with at least 1 PhD in STEM. The new Excellence in Research program provides a link between HBCU faculty and the research directorates. It is intended for HBCU PIs to find their intellectual research home in the respective research program or division. EIR has made 129 awards from 2018 to 2020 to HBCU faculty, and all research directorates participate. As you can see on the orange looking chart from 2009 to 2018, these 3 programs were responsible for 36% of all NSF funding to HBCUs. As a reminder, NSF has 300 programs. So just a little bit about impact. I want to show you some success stories, and I understand that success stories don't show all of impact, but they give you a small screenshot of what is possible. Prior to having funding from HBCU Up in 2008, Harris-Stowe State University in St. Louis, Missouri had no STEM programs. Since then, they have established biology and mathematics programs, and Harris-Stowe has become a national leader in producing Black mathematicians. A PI at Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida, who received a Research Initiation Award in 2012 from HBCU Up, 5 years later was awarded a $5 million CREST Center in Materials Research. HBCU Up provided seed funding to establish 2 new physics undergraduate degree programs at the University of the Virgin Islands in 2016 and at Virginia Union University in Richmond, Virginia in 2017. Faculty at both new departments have already received research awards, and the first 6 students graduated from these programs. And as a last example, a CREST Center Award in 1997 to North Carolina A&T University later resulted in the award of the only HBCU-led engineering research center funded by the Engineering Directorate. I'm showing you these examples to illustrate that faculty participate in research at research-intensive HBCUs, as well as at small HBCUs. So let me share with you briefly what we have done at NSF to promote collaborations, outreach, and inreach. A plethora of activities like workshops and webinars have resulted in more research proposal submissions by HBCU faculty and subsequently more awards. We have established a number of interagency collaborations. We have established a group of NSF program officers, the Excellence in Research Working Group, comprised of representatives from all directorates that participate in inreach and outreach activities. The CREST and HBCU programs conduct an annual PI meeting to connect PIs with program officers from all research directorates. And I'd like to conclude by talking a little bit about opportunities and challenges. On the opportunity side, HBCU faculty are poised to do research. This research may be mainstream or may be grounded in the mission of the HBCU institutions, which seek to connect research to community betterment and to the cultural context of the institutions. One thing we learned from history is that HBCUs know how to navigate challenging times. Since the end of slavery, through the Nadir, Jim Crow and segregation, federal policies that didn't favor them, to these challenging times of COVID-19 and racial reckoning. The challenges to HBCUs can be summed up in 6 words: systemic and historic underfunding of HBCUs, which has led to high faculty workloads, low pay, not enough staff, lack of supporting individuals like technicians, research faculty, postdocs, labs and classrooms that could be better equipped, and I could go on. Despite or because of these challenges, just last week, NSF received an unprecedented number of letters of intent for the Excellence in Research program, which shows that HBCU faculty are ready to move forward. It speaks to the fact that HBCU faculty are interested in, capable of, and poised to receiving NSF funding to conduct research that will benefit their students, their institutions, their communities, and indeed all of us. Let's imagine what could happen if all HBCUs had proper research funding. I promise you, HBCUs are a good investment. I have some additional slides with data for you if you're interested, and all of the data can be found at, is publicly available. I want to thank you again for this opportunity to speak with you about HBCUs and invite your questions and comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. We do have a few minutes, about 10 minutes for questions. So I would like to hear from other board members. Again, please raise your hand, in the participant sidebar on Zoom if you want to ask a question, and Brad will help keep me updated on that question. Okay, so I see Jerry. Let's start with you.
Thank you, Claudia. That was really a great presentation. I have a couple of quick questions. One of which may not be so quick, but with COVID impacting so many, both private and public institutions, what are you hearing with regards to concerns that some may not be able to survive through this?
There are certainly concerns that especially the most vulnerable HBCUs may have trouble making it through this. I also, though, am highly encouraged by what I hear from faculty, mostly from PIs, and their plans to move forward. There was no hesitation back in March when all of this started to think about new ways to teach, new ways to engage students in research. No one canceled any summer programs.
Okay.
All students were engaged virtually. I've received a number of proposals to move particularly the lab, chemistry and biology labs to a virtual model. The fact that we have received so many of letters of intent for research shows that the institutions are really ready to deal with this and move forward. Now, what it looks like, how enrollment, you saw the enrollment trend that's already going down, how that will impact HBCUs. I'm just hoping and praying, really.
Well, we're with you. Claudia, my second quick question is that some of the institutions are relatively small, and some faculty may have very heavy teaching loads, which can, in many respects, impede their ability to do research. So what's being helped to relieve them from really heavy teaching loads to let them have a balance of research and teaching? I know that's the ultimate question for a lot of institutions, but it does concern me in this equation of how you get more faculty to be engaging in research when their teaching loads are and service loads are incredibly heavy.
As a former faculty member with a 5+5 teaching load, I can speak to that. And that's 5 per semester, by the way. One thing we can do at NSF and the HBCU UP program and the Excellence in Research program do that both, is allow for academic year release time for faculty. We simply cannot expect the institutions, especially the smaller ones, to carry that burden. So it has worked well if we give faculty 25%, at smaller institutions, maybe even 50% academic year release time, and the payoff has been great.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Great, thanks, Claudia.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll go to Maureen and then Dario, Steve Willard, and Mel.
So again, Claudia, thank you for your very clear and compelling presentation. I'm really impressed with the very strong success of HBCUs. But I had a kind of a methodological question regarding your conclusions. You stated that, quote, systemic and historic underfunding has been an ongoing challenge. And I'm just curious, what is the benchmark against which you're comparing funding of HBCUs to determine that there has been a historical and systemic underfunding of these institutions? What are we comparing them to?
So when I say historic, it goes way back to the founding of the institutions. And I really have not done the study, but the literature exists that shows the underfunding by states, in particular, of the HBCUs. So I'll be glad to dig up some of that.
Thank you. I
just don't have it at hand. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm always interested in how the comparisons are done, because often I have found that the comparisons themselves may reflect a systemic bias or a foregone conclusion sometimes. So it's really, digging into what underlies that kind of a conclusion is of great interest. If you could send me something, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
So Dario?
Thank you, and thank you, Claudia, for the presentation. I wonder if you could comment on the opportunities you see in terms of partnership with, let's say in this case, the private sector. What's happening right now as a consequence of the moment is that many technology companies, just to give an example, are going to put a very significant focus on being able to engage in a new way, right, with HBCUs, to create and shape new programs, to invest in different ways, both through opportunities for internships, new centers, and you name it. what would you recommend and what would you suggest on ways for NSF to be a catalyst, right? To perhaps channel that energy in a way that is most constructive?
And I think your last words were key words, channel that energy, because these activities have been ongoing, and I'm sure they will sort of be ramped up now in this day where everyone wants to collaborate with HBCUs. What is often not happening is that on the other end, and by that I mean the companies who want to collaborate, that an environment exists in which Black and Brown students in particular feel welcome and can function, to be honest. So I hate for us to just sort of jump in on the bandwagon without considering the implications of that. Is that in the best interest of the students, of the institutions? And if it is, how do we really do it in a thoughtful way? I don't know if that answers your question, but some thought ought to be given to the climate and culture act.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, but I guess I would encourage to what degree can the NSF be a convener or a way to be able to do this well. Let me put it that way.
I'm sure we can. I would not be the expert in that area, but I'm sure others are, and I'm certainly happy to work with anyone who wants to take on that task. But thank you.
Steve Willard.
Yes, thank you. On one of Vic's skilled technical workforce meetings, I had the opportunity to speak to a number of historically Black colleges and university people, and I talked to them not only about how I think funding parity and opportunities, I think that's only step one. Then the step two, I said to them, was, what do you guys do better than anybody else? And with the list of things that you talked about, Claudia, of how they have overcome incredible obstacles, I think they have become potentially the country's experts on mentoring and bringing along students in the undergraduate and graduate programs. How can we think about how we might be able to fund some work that would allow historically Black colleges and universities to teach our other universities and college about the skills they've learned in mentoring students?
Well, I thank you for that question. That's actually asking a lot of them. You know, part of the success of why HBCUs are successful in that area, and I thought a lot about that, because everyone mentors, right? Everyone has research experiences, everyone has these new and innovative ways of teaching. So what is it about HBCUs that makes them do better in educating Black students in STEM? And it really has to do with the HBCU environment, the ethos, the history, the belonging to family and community. Now, can we teach that? I'm not sure, but it goes to what I said when I answered the last question. We can certainly hold other institutions accountable and help them in that way in establishing this culture and this environment to make Black and Brown students not only welcome, because they're now welcome, but to make it so they want to stay and they can thrive. And this is, I'm sure, where HBCUs can shed some light on how to do that. But I think until we make it clear to the 4,400 institutions that are not HBCUs, where actually 91% of Black students attend, and I don't know how we can do that in some way. I wish we could. Maybe that's a great discussion to have.
Wonderful, I'll look forward to it.
And we have just a little bit of time, so I'll just take two more questions. First, Steve Leaf, and then Suresh Babu.
Thanks, Helen. First, I have a question. I'll comment on that. When I was vice president of the UNC system, we had a number of HBCUs, and I think part of the reason they were so successful is role models. You take a place like A&T where you have a Black chancellor who's an electrical engineer, the students identified with that and saw a future there. But my question was, when we got the ERC at A&T when I was vice president, we're obviously really pleased. But did I understand you correctly? There haven't been any since then, because that was the first one.
Not an HBCU-led one.
Right.
No. Actually, this one is the only major center funded to an HBCU. There are no SDCs, and this is the only ERC.
Said I was
went to HBCUs.
I'm proud of the fact we got it when we did, and we were pretty excited, but I'm stunned that there haven't been any. Okay, but thank you.
And finally, Suresh Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think Stephen took away my question. What is the best practice used by HBCUs to break through that and make a transformative impact, and what can we learn from that? So that was my question too. What did they do that made them to get out to start an ERC leading one? So any insight?
I don't know if I have any insight on that. HBCU faculty want to do research like faculty at all institutions, right? I'm not sure what led to the success of this only one. I would venture to guess there were other great applications that were submitted. And I know we can only fund a few. But North Carolina A&T in particular has an infrastructure that's probably a little bit more advanced than at most other HBCUs in terms of their sponsored research office, their grants office. They actually do have grant writers, people to help faculty write grants. I want you to realize that most HBCU faculty, when they submit a proposal, do everything themselves, from the budget to putting it in Fastlane to filling out all of the forms. In many cases, there's no one to help read it over, make sure it's compliant. So there's a good structure at North Carolina A&T, which I wish we could replicate at others.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you, Claudia. And I think you pointed out, one of the challenges that HBCU face in terms of getting more research. So huge thank you to you, Claudia, to Karen, for the wonderful presentation, and to all of you for the thoughtful discussion. And we look forward to continuing this dialogue as we go ahead.